Greetings and welcome back for another episode of the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast with your hostess, Dr. Rhonda L. Hamilton. So how you doing out there? This is episode 4, I believe, and it has been a pleasure to talk with you about a topic or subject matter that is challenging for many. Mental illness. I want you guys to know that it's more common than not. In the United States, for example, nearly 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness, and these statistics come from 2019, pre-pandemic, so you can imagine how those numbers have increased. But at that time, that represented 51 plus million people who were living with mental illnesses. A lot of times we find out things about ourselves that are challenging to deal with. No one wants to have to be recognized, as you've heard me say in previous episodes. No one wants to wear the label or the stigma of having a mental illness or some sort of challenge. But the reality is more common than you realize. We've talked about the reality of having temporary situations where coming out of relationships or having grief longer than typically is expected. And really we talked about mental health, or the reality of mental health being the satisfactory control of your thoughts, your emotions, your psychological and behavioral practices. And so when it's not satisfactory for any of those understandings, usually there's something that needs to be addressed. Many people suffer from depression, anxiety, bipolar is very popular, and of course schizophrenia. But there's so many other disorders and so many other layers and diagnoses. It's important to always remember that we are more than our diagnosis. There's so much that makes up who we are. We talked about unresolved trauma because for the average everyday person who is challenged with having to overcome or deal with the onset of some form of depression or mental challenge or substance abuse, it's important to understand that all of that is under the same umbrella. Sometimes it comes from unresolved traumas in our life. We talked about that being related to some form of sexual abuse, domestic abuse. If we've witnessed something traumatic occurring, such as gun violence, which is happening all around us. Many of us experience rape. Bullying is something that can cause us to feel some level of anxiety. And what we're doing on the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast is we are raising awareness and creating an environment, a no judgment environment, where we can begin to open up and acknowledge the challenges that many of us live with daily. Are you the 1 in 5 that the statistics support are living with mental health challenges? If so, the first step is acknowledgement so that you can get the proper care. Not everybody needs to take medicine. Not everybody is comfortable going to support groups and speaking out loud about it. There are many ways that you can find yourself holistic and healthy ways to support and address any mental health challenges that you may be experiencing. A lot of our diets control our behavior patterns, thought processes. Sugar is very dangerous for our diets. So there's many things that we can do, and we're going to explore the different avenues on the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast, because we want you to live your healthy life, your best life. We want you to raise the standard in your life, and we don't want you to feel discouraged if you are someone who has or has not been diagnosed with having a mental illness or mental challenge in your life. We also want you to be aware of the social ramifications and determinants that impact your ability to live a stable and whole life free from emotional challenges or stress that becomes toxic. It is important that we practice preventative understandings as opposed to waiting to understand that something's wrong with us. And so when we know that stress is toxic and we know that we're living lifestyles where maybe our recreational use of drugs has become more heavily depended upon, it's important that we set boundaries. You know, the pandemic has opened us up to a whole new understanding of who we are as a people and as a nation. And we've had so much death. And it's important that we understand that wellness has to become a part of our preventative intentions of preserving life. And when we learn and know better, then we're supposed to be able to do better. This is Dr. Rhonda L. Hamilton, and I appreciate you hanging out. I'd love for you to put some comments on the podcast or send me your input. There are many folks out there that are challenged. We know because we are talking and advocating for them daily. And it's not okay to feel that you're alone out there. It's not okay to feel like you're the only one experiencing the challenges that you're experiencing. Many of our young adults that we counsel are challenged to acknowledge their mental health or their substance use. Many of them are using substances and drinking heavily to deal with matters of mental health. And the problem is when we don't set boundaries, these behaviors become very dangerous. And it's important that we don't shorten our life unnecessarily. Many of us fall into a deep depression and suicide becomes real. The thoughts of such and the dark spaces and voices that appear cause us to feel some kind of way and causes us to feel out of control. I want you to know that you're not alone out there. I want to also put on the radar the understanding of self-love, because sometimes it's hard to deal with or accept diagnoses of mental health or other health ailments when we're in a space or a place where we are not comfortable with who or where we are in life. I've had many of my young adults tell me that they didn't feel happy with the job that they were working on, the level in their life that they had accomplished. Many have emotional challenges. They're not able to maintain relationships, and it becomes frustrating. Whether it's a romantic relationship, a best friend relationship, whether there's disruption in your household. A lot of times when we don't have healthy boundaries in place, it becomes hard to manage day to day. On the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast, we challenge our listeners to depend on your inner understandings and make your reality the process of being truthful with yourself about the challenges that you're dealing with. You know, all around us we have things going on. If you cut the news on, it's not long before you'll hear something horrific. If you're someone who works in first responders, works on the ground, in the police, firemen, EMT, drew a brain fart. If you're someone who's seeing trauma daily, and you don't have a healthy outlet, healthy boundaries in place, it's important to realize that you can absorb that in your spirit and it becomes a part of your energies. And we've got to be more vigilant about the surroundings, our environment, our social circles, our inner circles. We've just got to be more vigilant about who we let in our energies or in our space, or who we yield our energies or our space to. We got to be more vigilant about our health, because it all becomes impactful on our mental health. So you've been diagnosed, and you're struggling with understanding that this is your reality. Your world isn't over. You are so much more than your diagnosis. I struggle with the reality of seeing my mother have voices and hallucinations and have dark understandings. And she's such a sweet-spirited woman. I remember having a conversation with the aunt when I was a teenager, and I was so frustrated because all people could see was the reality of my mom being this crazy lady, as they title her, this woman walking and talking with voices. They didn't know her story, didn't know her journey, they didn't care. And what I realized as a youth growing up is that we rather put labels on people, and that's why you feel so uncomfortable having received a diagnosis and having to know that your reality may include taking medicine, or your reality may include not being in control of your emotions, or your reality includes that you're popping pills, taking or doing lines of coke, or freebasing, as we used to call it, doing dope, alcohol, things that are taking you outside of your normal realm of being able to have satisfactory control of your mind, your psychological, emotional thoughts, your behavior. Are you violent? Are you harmful and dangerous to yourself? Guys, I want you to know out there you're not alone. But on the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast, it's my intention to make certain that you know that everyday folks just like you and I deal with these realities. Some of us require more reinforcements than others because of the life that we've lived, the life that we're living, the exposures and things that we've been thrusted in front of, some of them beyond our control, some of them we've chosen because of our out-of-control behaviors. But I want you to know that yours is a life worth loving. Self-love is so important. We've got to learn how to let ourselves off the hook for all of the horrible decisions that we've made or haven't made for the betterment of our health. And when we have made decisions for the betterment of our health and have fallen short, or still found out that our reality is that we've got to deal with some mental challenges or some health ailments, we've got to get strong in our minds about being able to be stable enough to accept our reality and to put a game plan together for living. For living. Yours is a life that is worth loving, and most importantly and especially, that's worth living. Mental health is not the end. Let it be your beginning. Because once you become educated and aware about the realities that 1 in 5 Americans are living with mental illness challenges, you're not alone. And there is something that you can do to stabilize and raise your standard of living and begin to have whole and solid relationships. But everything starts with you, and it starts with you making your mind up to be responsible enough to research what it is you're feeling. Understand it not from other people's perspectives, but from your own. Self-love. Look in the mirror and find something. Pledge to find something positive about yourself daily, something other than that mental health diagnosis that you've received, something other than the depression that you quietly live with, something other than the drug usage that you've turned to. You're not alone, but it's time to climb out of it. It's time to live, raise the standard of your life, and to begin to practice wellness understandings. Are you writing in your journals daily? Writing can be very therapeutical. It can also help to chart the path of your growth. We have to start somewhere. Start today. Self-love. What is your first message of love to yourself in your journal? Your journal doesn't have to be fancy. It can be a piece of paper that you go to daily to write your thoughts on. It could be a book, a tablet, your phone, a recorder, your email. Just a consistent space where you're going to collect your thoughts daily, weekly, monthly, and then yearly. It is important that we can look in the mirror daily and find positive things about ourselves that we can attribute to the reasons for why we are unique, we are worthy of being loved, and capable of overcoming any obstacle that we're dealing with. Do you have a support system out there? Who do you talk to when things get rough? I had to learn that you can't do it alone. I was such an overachiever. Didn't want to be labeled with no kind of mental illness, so I had to make sure that I succeeded at everything I did. But no matter what you do, I want you to understand something. You might as well realize it. Life happens. Whether temporary for some or long-term for others. Stress, depression, anxiety, grief, violence, trauma, drug abuse, all of it contributes to an early grave. And I want you to commit daily, moving forward, to looking in that mirror and finding something positive to hold on to, so that we can do this one day at a time and prove to yourself that yours is a life worth saving. And then if there's someone out there in your circle who needs these positive understandings of support, who needs to demonstrate and develop consistent methods for reimagining a life of higher standards, a life of self-love, a life where they can effectively begin to deal with the mental challenges, diagnosis, labels, the trauma, the depression, the anxiety, the drug abuse, whatever the reality is. We've got to start saving ourselves and then caring enough to help save the person beside us or in front of us. Mindfully making a difference. Our holistic approach educational approach, keeping it real approach to dealing with matters of mental health and unresolved trauma. I want you to know that there are many levels of mental illness. And yes, psychiatry, psychology, counseling, yes, all of it necessary. Therapy, yes. But it's important that you understand what your game plan, what works for you. Because a lot of what's absent in our care processes is the understanding of preventative education. Many of us didn't talk about mental health growing up. We don't go to school or send our children to school to understand what this awful reality looks like, because that's what they frame it as, an awful reality. When in fact, it's another part of our characteristic and our makeup, and the sooner we educate our populations about the reality of having mental health challenges, exposures, and realities of depression and anxiety. As soon as we expose the educational understanding of it, the sooner we can help raise the awareness and help folks reach out and speak out and get regimens of healthy living in their lives. Are you familiar with meditating or the act of meditation? It's a calming technique, therapeutic in its nature. I want you to Google meditation. We're going to talk a little bit more about it on the series as we move forward. Yoga is something that's very helpful for many. What does your support plan for healthy living look like? We've got to be willing to acknowledge so that we can begin to adopt healthier practices and understandings and be comfortable with opening up so that we can improve our living. What would be the point of all of this? Well, when SAMHSA did the research, one of the things they understood is that we're dying earlier just because we haven't created a well-rounded balance in our living. And many of us are guilty of not loving ourselves. It is so important. I am a professional who believes in spiritual wellness, who believes in positive mindsets, who believes in our ability to be able to heal ourselves from within. And that can include medicine, that can include counseling, but it also includes you being in charge of your care routine at all times of your living and being. Our diet is something that imparts negative understandings in our being. Remember those energies we talked about. The goal is not to yield to situations or individuals that rob us of our energies, positive energies. Get in that mirror daily and find something wonderful about yourself. Because even with the mental health diagnosis, even as a survivor or a current recipient of abuse, even as you struggle in your current situation, there is something positive about you. The fact that you took the time to listen to the podcast today and to use it as a motivational component in changing your life for the better. You are deserving of love. Yours is a life worth living, even with a mental health diagnosis. Did you know that 1 in 5 Americans live with mental health challenges? Guess what? You are so much more than your diagnosis. Now, what are you doing to raise the standard of your living and to ensure that you have healthy boundaries in place, because that's what it's going to take. The pandemic has taught us that we as a culture and as a people as a whole, on average, are not living a healthy life. And there's no wonder. The reality of the disparities, and when we talk about disparities, we talk about the gaps in the level of care, the level of resources, the level of social determinants that we have access and exposure to, such as our housing environments, where we get to go shopping at for many of us, where our dollar will spend because of our economic challenges. We generally are a population of high blood pressure, diabetes, drugs, self-medicating personalities. That's generally the stereotypes or the realities of what they tell our stories or frame them in. And the truth is, there's an underlining that has contributed to why we typically are living these types of lives. And at the core of that is the reality of the lopsided exposure that we have and educational understandings about our history, about our traumas, the research that has surfaced to support the reality of our mental health. It is important that we take our powers back, but in order to do that, we've got to be able to have educational and support mechanisms that help us to feel confident and stronger about speaking out about things that we're not that comfortable and knowledgeable about. It's okay not to know, but you've got to be able to acknowledge that you should be in the know so that you can get yourself in the right company to get the kind of information and healing and opportunities for education needed so that you can stabilize. No, having a mental health challenge is not pleasant. And because there's so many levels to it, many people have darker experiences than others. But the truth of the matter is we can all find our balance. We've got to be willing to trust in environments where we can receive care and in opportunities just like the one that we're trying to offer here on the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast. Opportunities to open up and get in touch with who we are. Despite your mental health diagnosis, you are deserving of love, and yours is a life worth living, and we're just trying to help you to live more of it. I'm Dr. Rhonda L. Hamilton, and today we're talking about the reality of being diagnosed with a mental health challenge or illness, the reality of not being diagnosed with a mental health challenge or reality, but just feeling off, whether temporary or otherwise. Time to come into the know, guys. Time to keep it 100. Yes, you too can find yourself off balance. And when that happens, it's important that we still find a way to stay in control of ourselves. What does your wellness guide for living look like? Thank you for joining us today on the Mindfully Making a Difference podcast. I hope that there's something in the message that will challenge you to find your mirror daily and find your positive affirmation or attribute or characteristic about yourself and build upon it. Recognize your boundaries. We didn't talk about triggers today, but we will. My work on the community has me helping families and individuals daily who are lacking healthy boundaries, and the drug usage and the depression and the stress and their living environments are very much in turmoil. And daily, we're putting routines together to help people take their power back. We live in a nation where oftentimes we're governed or told how we should feel, and most importantly and most dangerously, about our mental health. Well, when the care systems are so unevenly divided and you're not getting proper, comprehensive, and complete systems and accesses for care, it is important that you stand up to take your power back, because yours is a life worth living. And it's time to channel your anger into the positive understanding of making a difference in your life and learning how to live with your mental health so that you can be someone that your community and your family looks to, because you're not alone. 1 in 5 in America live with mental health challenges, whether they tell you or whether it's obvious or not. So you are not alone. And it is time that we start caring about one another. Let's commit to saving ourselves so that we can save someone else. This is Dr. Rhonda L. Hamilton, and I want you to know always that mental health matters. Until next time, remember to always make an effort to mindfully make a difference in someone else's life. God bless you.